You never think you will be the one sitting across from a doctor who can't make eye contact, trying to figure out how to say the word cancer without shattering your entire sense of existence. It was a Wednesday, ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of day you forget before it ends, but I remember every detail of it now like a scar carved into memory. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of sterile cotton and floor polish, the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting to pounce. Dr. Allen shifted in his chair, flipping through my blood work as if he hadn't already memorized it, and then looked up with that practiced, professional pity. "It's a rare form of lymphoma," he said, "but we caught it early." I couldn't hear anything after lymphoma. I just stared at a crack in the tile and wondered how the hell I'd explain this to my wife without crumbling into dust. I was only 51. I just made plans to renovate the kitchen. When I told her that night, standing in the kitchen we never got to redo, she dropped the wine bottle she'd just uncorked. It didn't shatter, it bounced, somehow, and rolled under the counter, but the look on her face hit me harder than the diagnosis had. For a moment, she was just frozen, as if trying to process whether this meant I had weeks or years. Then, suddenly, her arms were around me, tighter than they'd been in months. "We'll fight this together," she whispered, and I believed her, because why wouldn't I? This was the woman who'd been with me since our late 30s, who held my hand through layoffs, who cried when our son was born, who once waited at the DMV for 4 hours just so I wouldn't have to take off work. That night, I lay awake in bed, bald terror crawling through my chest. But every time I looked at her, sleeping beside me, her fingers still laced in mine, I told myself this was survivable because I wouldn't have to face it alone. The irony now? The part that makes my stomach turn even years later? It wasn't the cancer that almost killed me. It was the illusion that she loved me. Because the truth is, when I closed my eyes in that hospital bed, fighting for my life, she was out there somewhere, not curled in a chair beside me like she promised, but with him, laughing, drinking, living like I was already dead. And I didn't know it yet. But the first crack in my world had already formed. All it took was a nurse's innocent question, 6 words that detonated the entire story I thought was my life. But we're not there yet. No, back then, I still believed in her. And that made everything that followed so much worse. At first, it was subtle, the kind of shift you wouldn't even notice unless you were paying attention. And the truth is, I wasn't, not really, because most of my energy was going into staying alive, into dragging myself out of bed with a dry mouth and aching bones just to smile weakly and pretend that the chemo wasn't kicking my ass. I told myself the silence in the kitchen was just exhaustion, that her long stares into her phone were moments of distraction, and that the way she stopped making eye contact during our conversations was just her heart breaking quietly from watching me fall apart. I wanted to believe that the woman who once massaged my shoulders after a long shift and sang Springsteen off-key while washing dishes was still somewhere behind those tired eyes and soft apologies, but the truth was harder to ignore each day. "I'm volunteering more now," she told me, lips curling into a smile too polished to be real. "It helps me cope." I nodded, too grateful to question it, too damn scared to admit what I was starting to feel, like the air between us had gone cold. Then came the girls' nights, first just once a month, then once a week. Then she stopped even pretending it was about friends I knew. There were nights she didn't come home until past midnight, her perfume still hanging in the hallway long after her heels tapped their retreat up the stairs. I was curled on the couch one of those nights, too weak to make it upstairs, a blanket around me like a shroud, and when I asked her softly how the evening went, she muttered, "Exhausting," and disappeared into the bathroom. I didn't see her for the rest of the night. Other times, she'd come home already changed into sweats, hair damp from a shower she definitely didn't take at home, and she'd crawl into bed without so much as a good night. I tried to ask once, maybe twice, but the words turned to dust in my throat. "You know how much pressure I'm under," she snapped one night when I asked if she could just sit with me for a bit. "You're not the only one going through something." That line hit harder than the chemo ever could. I remember lying awake that night, the moonlight creeping across our ceiling, watching her sleep on the far edge of the bed like I was contagious, not with cancer, but with burden. I still told myself she was coping, still excused the absences, the locked phone screen, the fake laughter from another room. I didn't want to believe what I already knew in my gut, because believing it meant that while I was counting every heartbeat I had left, she was giving hers away to someone else. I didn't know who yet, or how, or when it started. But something was off, terribly off. And once I started looking deeper, the truth would hit harder than any diagnosis ever could. There are moments in life that don't feel like they happen to you. They feel like the universe has paused time just long enough for your soul to register a warning before everything collapses. That moment came for me on a rainy Thursday morning, wrapped in thin hospital sheets with an 4-line threading into my arm like some kind of silent accusation, when a young nurse, mid-20s maybe, cheerful in that overly perky way people in oncology try to be, stepped into my room with a clipboard and a question that would change everything. "Hey, just checking if her boyfriend is stopping by again today," she said casually, like she was asking if I wanted Jell-O or juice. And then she smiled at me, like she had no idea she'd just ignited a fuse inside my ribcage. I blinked once, maybe twice, before answering in the kind of voice you only use when you're suddenly aware that nothing makes sense anymore. "I'm her husband," I said, and the silence that followed felt like it could crack the windows. The nurse's face went white, and not the pale white of someone who forgot breakfast. This was a ghost white, a "you just said something that should not be true" kind of white. She stammered out an apology, said something about confusion, charts, and how she must have mixed me up with another patient, but her eyes told the truth long before her mouth caught up. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. She knew exactly who I was, and even more disturbingly, she knew who she thought my wife was with. That smile was gone now, replaced with a kind of wide-eyed dread people wear when they realize they've exposed something not meant to be seen. I let her leave without another word, but inside, something shifted, something cracked in a way I couldn't put back together. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like an hour, the fluid dripping like a metronome to the growing drumbeat in my chest. Every excuse my wife had given me, every missed call, every late night, every "you're just paranoid from the meds" suddenly felt sharpened, loaded with meaning I hadn't been willing to hear before. And the worst part wasn't the nurse's slip-up. The worst part was how fast my brain accepted it. How fast I knew. That was the moment the seed was planted, not of jealousy or paranoia, but of a brutal clarity. And once you start pulling on that thread, you better be ready for what unravels. Because the truth doesn't just set you free. It breaks you open first. There's something terrifying about realizing your instincts were right, especially when you've spent weeks gaslighting yourself into believing otherwise. Convincing yourself that your trauma is twisting your judgment and that your suspicions are nothing more than poison from the chemotherapy clouding your mind. But after that nurse's accidental confession, I couldn't let it go. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, couldn't even swallow without hearing her voice say "your boyfriend," echoing through my skull like a loaded gun cocking behind me. So I did what no man ever wants to admit to. I started digging. I waited until she left her phone unattended in the bathroom while she showered, something she used to do all the time, but lately, not so much. I installed a silent tracking app, one I found on a cancer support forum of all places, where another guy, just like me, learned the truth the same way. Within 15 minutes, I had access to her location history, call logs, and even some cached messages. It felt like betrayal just to look, but nothing compared to what I was about to find. That night, while she was supposedly at a late-night caregiver support circle, I watched her tiny blinking location dot drift slowly across the map and land not at the hospital, not at the rec center, but in the back lot of a mid-range hotel on the outskirts of town. Not even the front parking lot where normal people parked, the back. The kind of place you don't drive to for company. You drive there for secrecy. I sat there staring at that glowing blue dot, unmoving for over an hour, and my hands started shaking, not with surprise, but with the sickening clarity of confirmation. She didn't even bother lying well. The hotel was 10 miles in the opposite direction from where she claimed she'd be. I checked her call history next, and there it was, the same number, again and again, logged in late hours, never saved to contacts, listed only as private, but dialed too often to be anything casual. One of those calls happened the same day I was under sedation for a spinal tap. I was lying in a hospital bed, half conscious, dreaming about her holding my hand while she was with him. I don't remember much from the next hour, just the sound of blood pounding in my ears and the cold, metallic taste of adrenaline sitting on my tongue like acid. I wasn't angry yet, not exactly. I was trying to hold together a body that was already breaking, now realizing my marriage was rotting from the inside, too. I took screenshots, downloaded logs, and backed everything up. Not because I was ready to confront her, but because I needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't some hallucination from meds or grief. The truth had a heartbeat now, and it pulsed from the screen in front of me. I just stared into the glowing dark, realizing I wasn't fighting for my life anymore. There's a special kind of hell in trying to confront someone you love while still hoping they'll lie well enough to keep the truth from shattering you. I didn't come at her with rage or accusations or screenshots. I just sat across from her one night while the TV buzzed in the background and asked, in a voice far softer than I thought I could muster, "Is there something going on? Something you want to tell me?" She blinked at me like I'd spoken in another language, tilted her head, and let out this soft, practiced laugh, the kind meant to disarm, to lull you into doubting your own senses. "What do you mean?" she asked, setting down her wine like this was just a casual chat, like I hadn't spent the last 72 hours watching her location history betray me. I said I'd noticed she was distant lately, that things felt different. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, and that's when the switch flipped, when the machinery kicked in. She leaned in close, touched my arm, and said the words I now loathe more than any curse I've ever heard. "Sweetheart, you're imagining things, the treatment messes with your head, remember? You've been tired. You've been confused." And just like that, she weaponized my illness against me, turned my own body into a smokescreen for her deceit. "You think I'd do something like that while you're sick? While you're fighting for your life?" Her voice cracked on cue, tears in her eyes, and if I hadn't already seen the lies on her phone, I might have believed her. Hell, part of me still wanted to believe her, because it's easier to think you're losing your mind than to admit the person you trusted most is standing in front of you playing the victim while secretly living a double life behind your back. She even went so far as to suggest that I talk to my doctor about mental fog, said she'd read that paranoia was common in chemo patients. I nodded, smiled even, because I wanted to see how deep she'd go. And oh, she went deep. But even as she wept crocodile tears and offered to cut back on volunteer hours for my sake, something in my chest had already hardened. I knew. I knew because her lies weren't designed to protect me. They were designed to protect her. I knew because when someone's telling you the truth, it doesn't feel like standing under interrogation lights. I knew because I had evidence she didn't know I had, and now I had confirmation that she was willing to gaslight me to hell and back just to protect the fantasy she'd built around her betrayal. That night, I let her believe she'd won, let her tuck me into bed like I was still her fragile husband. But my eyes were wide open now, and I wasn't fragile anymore. I was a man sharpening his silence into a weapon. The lie machine was running at full speed, but soon it would break, and when it did, I'd make sure she would be the one left questioning reality. There's a moment, right after you hand a stranger thousands of dollars to follow your wife, that you stop feeling like a husband and start feeling like a man preparing for war. I didn't want to do it, but I had to know, and after weeks of lies disguised as concern and gaslighting so smooth it could have passed for affection, I reached out to a private investigator a friend of mine recommended quietly, someone who specialized in what he called clean truth extraction. His tone was blunt, emotionless, the kind of man who's seen hundreds of people just like me, pale, sick, grieving, and still begging to be wrong. I handed over her schedule, her plate number, the call logs I'd saved, and I waited. Days turned to weeks. Weeks felt like years, and every time my phone buzzed with a message that wasn't from the PI, I felt this dull ache behind my eyes like my body was bracing itself for an explosion. And then the photos came. One text, one zip file, one confirmation that I wasn't paranoid. I was betrayed. She wasn't just cheating. She was cheating with him. Adam, my best friend since sophomore year of college. The guy who held my head over the toilet during finals week, who gave the toast at our wedding, who once helped me build the crib for our son with beers in hand and jokes about how neither of us knew which end of a wrench to hold. That Adam. The one who had dinner at our table last Thanksgiving. The one who hugged me outside the hospital and said, "Man, you've got this. You're the toughest guy I know." That Adam. In the photos, they weren't just kissing, they were living. Laughing at a downtown restaurant, her hand curled into his chest like it belonged there, exiting a hotel room where I knew she never thought a camera would find her. She looked happy, relaxed, and he looked like a man who knew he'd gotten away with the unthinkable. I sat there, staring at those high-res images like they were x-rays of a heart that had stopped beating, and all I could think about were the years, decades, even of memories now poisoned beyond recognition. I remembered him helping me move into our first home. I remembered the time we went camping and he pulled me out of the river when I slipped on the rocks. I remembered the goddamn birthday video he helped our son make when I was stuck in chemo. And now, all I could see was his hand on her thigh, his lips on her neck, and her smile, the same one I used to think was reserved for me. You want to believe betrayal is loud, like glass shattering or doors slamming, but it's not. It's silent, surgical, A quiet dismantling of everything you thought was safe. And as I saved the photos, backed them up, and sent them to my lawyer with a subject line that simply read "Use this," I realized something sickeningly clear. They didn't just lie to me. They buried me alive and smiled at my funeral. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't dead yet. And now? I had nothing left to lose. There's a strange calm that comes over a man once he's seen the worst of someone and still manages to stand. I think that's why, in the days leading up to what I now call the dinner, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The rage had cooled, the grief had hardened, and what remained was precision. I planned the evening like a funeral, a family-style gathering, something intimate, nostalgic. I told my wife I wanted one last moment to feel normal, to celebrate making it through the last round of chemo. She cried when I asked, hugged me, told me how proud she was. It almost made me laugh, the performance of it all. She helped me plan the menu. I texted our grown kids, invited a few old friends, and I sent one message, quiet, casual, to him. Would mean a lot if you came. Just a small get-together. Like old times. He responded within minutes. Said he'd be honored. I smiled. Of course he would. The night of the dinner, everything looked perfect. Lights dimmed just enough to be cozy, the dining table set like something out of a Hallmark film, and everyone dressed in the soft tones of fall celebration. She looked stunning, like she always did when she wanted attention, hair curled, lips glossed, that laughed too loud to be real. He arrived late, of course. Adam always had to make an entrance. He hugged me like nothing had happened, like I hadn't seen him with his hand on my wife's waist in a hotel hallway 2 weeks ago. I hugged him back. Then I poured the wine, toasted to family, to loyalty. I saw her eyes flicker at that last part. I could almost hear the screws tightening behind her eyelids. When dessert was served, I cleared my throat and said I wanted to share something. Just a few memories, I said, holding up a remote and casting a slideshow on the TV. And then, slide by slide, the real show began. First, her at the restaurant with Adam. Then, her leaving the hotel. Then them kissing in his car. Gasps filled the room. My daughter covered her mouth. My son stood up and said nothing, just looked. Looked at the two people he used to call role models. She froze. He blanched. And I just watched. She tried to speak. This isn't what it looks like. Classic. Adam stuttered something about needing to explain, but I held up a hand. No, you don't. This isn't about explanation. This is about exposure. Her face twisted, confusion, horror, then fury. But the mask had already cracked. The room wasn't quiet anymore. My friends were whispering. My daughter was crying. My son was walking out. Adam stood there like a child who'd been caught stealing from the church basket. And she just stood in the wreckage, naked in the truth, finally seen for who she really was. And I, after months of dying inside, I'd never felt more alive. The thing no one tells you about divorce, especially when you're the one pulling the trigger, is that it doesn't feel like victory, at least not at first. It feels like death with paperwork. It feels like the silence that follows a storm you should have seen coming, but didn't, because you were too busy trusting someone who was sharpening the knife behind your back. I served her the papers on a Monday morning, dropped them off with a process server who knew better than to make small talk, and went home to my recliner, chemo-sore and hollow-eyed, but clean, spiritually clean, for the first time in years. Recovery, for me, wasn't just about killing cancer cells. It was about purging every toxic remnant of the life I thought I had, burning away the lies until I found something resembling me underneath. I started therapy twice a week, dragging my exhausted body to a quiet office downtown where a woman named Dr. Park didn't pity me, didn't coddle me, she challenged me. She made me face not just her betrayal, but the way I'd been slowly dying long before cancer ever touched my blood. She helped me realize how I'd made myself small in my own marriage, how I'd ignored red flags for years just to preserve a facade of family. And I started rebuilding, not with bricks or big declarations, but with small, stubborn steps. I reached out to old friends I hadn't spoken to since college. I signed up for an art class at the community center. I bought a second-hand guitar and started fumbling through chords with fingers still stiff from treatment. And something strange happened. I started laughing again. Not the forced chuckles I used to muster at her dry sarcasm, but real, stomach-deep laughs that caught me off guard and sometimes ended in tears. My body was weak, sure, but my spirit had muscle memory, and piece by piece, it was coming back stronger than before. I went on walks. I read books that weren't about illness. I stopped checking her social media. I blocked Adam's number and deleted every message without reading it. They were ghosts now. The divorce went through in under 2 months, clean, efficient, uncontested. She took her half. I kept the house. And every night I sat on the porch with a blanket and a cup of tea, watching the sun dip behind the trees like a slow, golden exhale. I realized I didn't need justice from the world. I just needed freedom from her. And now I had it. I'll never forget the silence in the oncologist's office that day, not the heavy kind that follows bad news, but the stunned kind that clings to your skin when you hear something so good you don't quite believe it at first. Dr. Allen glanced down at my chart, then back at me, smiled faintly, and said, "Your scans are clear. No sign of active disease." I blinked. That was it. No dramatic music. No fireworks. Just those 6 words that felt like thunder in my chest. I was in remission. After months of being poisoned to stay alive, betrayed by the one person I trusted most, and dragging my body across the finish line of divorce court, the weight I'd been carrying, sickness, lies, grief, all of it, finally began to lift. I walked out of that hospital into a breeze that felt like it was blowing just for me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I had permission to start living. That same week, I bought a cabin, an old fixer-upper tucked just off a quiet lake in northern Georgia, a place I'd bookmarked in my mind during chemo sessions while staring out hospital windows dreaming of a world without beeping machines and whispered apologies. I packed what I needed, left the house that once held family dinners and silent betrayals, and moved into the smell of pine wood and the sound of water lapping against a dock. The cabin didn't come with much, just creaky floorboards, a dusty wood stove, and a garden so overgrown it looked like nature had taken it back. But to me, it was paradise. I built raised beds with my own hands, planted tomatoes and bell peppers, strung fishing line along the dock, and caught bass with the patience of a man who had learned the value of stillness. No more noise. No more secrets. Just sunrises that painted the water gold and evenings filled with the croak of frogs and the whistle of wind through trees. Each morning, I drank coffee on the porch wrapped in a flannel blanket, the steam rising into the cool mountain air like a benediction. I wrote in a journal. I took long walks without checking my phone. I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, because it already had, and I was still standing. I didn't need closure from her, or revenge against him, or sympathy from anyone. What I needed, what I found, was a kind of peace you only earn when you've lost everything and chosen, deliberately, to build something better from the ashes. Out here, the scars don't define me. They remind me. And every time I press a seed into soil or cast a line into that mirror-flat lake, I'm reminded that some things, the best things, grow only after the storm is past. The beauty of rock bottom is that it reveals who was standing on your shoulders the entire time, and once you shake them off, it's only a matter of time before they start falling. Word got out fast after the dinner. Not just to our kids, who were old enough now to understand betrayal when they saw it, but to her office, her friends, our community. You don't come back from being caught in 4K, and she didn't. HR at her firm quietly transitioned her out, claiming restructuring, though everyone knew it was because clients didn't want to work with someone whose dirty laundry had become local gossip. Adam? He disappeared faster than the last sliver of dignity she had left, blocked her on everything, told mutual friends he'd been manipulated, and went back to his wife. Yes, his wife. The one I didn't even know existed until my lawyer dug into his financials. Turns out they'd both been lying to someone. The kids were the part one didn't expect. I never asked them to pick sides, never said a negative word about their mother, but they saw everything. They saw me fighting for my life while she played house with a man who used to toast to our anniversary. They saw her deception, not just in the photos, but in her inability to show even a shred of remorse after the truth came out. My daughter stopped returning her calls. My son moved back home with me for a while, said he just wanted to be around someone real. I never asked them to hate her. I only asked them to see her. And they did. Slowly, she unraveled, jobless, reputation in ashes, alone in the same house we once called home. I heard from mutual she tried dating again, but word followed her like smoke. And when men learned the kind of woman who'd cheat on her husband while he was in chemo, they stopped calling. Eventually, so did her own reflection. The knock came one Sunday morning. I'd just come in from fishing. My cabin smelled like firewood, fresh trout, and pine. She looked older, thinner, mascara streaked down her cheeks like ink bleeding through a page. Her voice cracked on my name. Please. I made a mistake. She said she missed our life, missed the way I looked at her before I saw the truth, missed the man who would have done anything to keep our family together. I'm not asking to undo it all, she said. Just a chance. Just one chance. I stood there in the doorway, the cold wind curling around her like consequence, and I felt nothing. I stepped back, not to invite her in, but to close the door. As I turned and walked away, the kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. Not because she was broken, but because I wasn't anymore.